Welcome to the deep dive. Really glad you could join us. We're digging into the material you sent over for us today, and our topic is, well, it's radio. Something you might feel is familiar, maybe just background noise, but honestly, the sources you shared, they show some surprising depth that changed everything, and, well, your material suggests it's still incredibly powerful. Critically so, even. So our mission here is to really unpack the key stuff from your sources, the science behind it, the history, and maybe most importantly, why radio is still so relevant. Let's jump in. Okay, let's start with the science. Forgetting about tuning dials for a moment. Based on the material, what's actually, happening scientifically when a radio signal travels? What was it?
Well, what's really fascinating is that at its heart, radio uses these things called electromagnetic waves. You can sort of picture them as invisible ripples moving through space. And your sources point out these waves, they're part of the same big family as a visible light or X-rays, even microwaves, just operating at much lower frequencies.
Low frequencies, okay.
Yeah, and the trick, if you want to call physics a trick, is putting information onto those waves, encoding it somehow.
Encoding.
Exactly. You take a sound, a voice, music, whatever, turn it into an electrical signal, and then you essentially make that signal ride on the electromagnetic wave. And you send it through the air, completely wireless, over, potentially huge distances.
Riding the waves. I like that visual. So how does that work, this riding? Is that where modulation comes in? I saw that term in the material quite a bit.
That's precisely it. Modulation is the key. It's simply the process of changing some aspect of that wave to carry the information. You're basically altering the wave's shape or its timing to encode the sound you want to send.
Okay, altering it. How?
Well, the two main ways your sources talk about are changing its amplitude or its frequency. Amplitude is basically the strength of the wave. Think of it like the height of the ripple.
Right.
And frequency is how often the wave cycles, like per second, how fast the ripples are coming. Changing those is how we get different kinds of radio signals.
That makes sense. Amplitude and frequency.
Right.
So, okay, we figure out the science. We can send these waves with info. How did we get from that, lab idea to something people actually gathered around and listened to? What's the history there, according to the sources?
The sources really point to the 1890s as the key starting point for practical radio. And the big name there is Guglielmo Marconi. But what's interesting, and the sources highlight this, is that initially, he wasn't sending voices. Not at all.
No. What then?
Just Morse code. Dots and dashes. It was basically wireless telegraphy, sending messages over long distances, especially ship to shore, ship to ship. That was revolutionary in itself.
Wow. Okay, so wireless telegraph first. That jump from dots and dashes to actual sound, like voice or music, that must have been huge.
Oh, absolutely massive. And that leap, that's what really ignited the radio boom in the 1920s. Your sources paint a really vivid picture of that time. Radio suddenly became the main source for entertainment, for news. You had families literally gathering around the radio set in the evening, listening to dramas, comedies, news updates. I mean, it was the first true mass medium, bringing the whole world right into your living room.
And just think about the power of that. Pure audio. No TV, no YouTube, obviously, just sound, creating these shared experiences, connecting everyone. It must have completely changed daily life. Now, something else your material brings up is AM versus FM. We still see those labels everywhere. How does that tie back to the amplitude and frequency stuff we just covered?
Right. So this is exactly where those modulation techniques define the difference. Remember, modulation is changing the wave.
Yep, changing the wave to carry the info.
Okay, so AM stands for amplitude modulation. With AM, you change the strength, the amplitude of the wave to match the sound signal. Now, the big advantage, these waves can travel really far. Especially at night, they can bounce off the atmosphere.
Oh, right, I've heard that, like skipping a stone.
Exactly. They can cover huge distances. But the downside, because it relies on signal strength, is that it's really easily undetected by electrical noise. Thunderstorms, machinery. That's why AM radio often has that static, that crackle.
Ah, okay. So that explains the fuzziness sometimes. What about FM then?
FM is frequency modulation. So here, instead of changing the strength, you change the frequency of the wave, how fast it's cycling in time, with the sound signal. This method is much, much less bothered by static and interference. That's why FM generally sounds so much clearer, higher fidelity.
But there's a catch, I assume.
Yeah, the range. FM waves travel more in a straight line of sight, basically, so they don't bounce the same way AM does. Their broadcast range is typically much shorter.
Got it. So the analogy in your sources works perfectly then. AM is like that long-distance call that can be a bit scratchy, while FM is like talking to your neighbor, crystal clear sound, but they have to be, well, nearby. It really highlights that trade-off, doesn't it? Range versus quality. Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really interesting, especially now with streaming, podcasts, everything digital. Based on the sources you shared, why is radio, like old school radio, still relevant? Why does it still matter so much?
This is such a crucial point the material makes. It argues that radio is still, arguably, the single fastest, most reliable way to reach a mass audience. Especially, and this is key, during emergencies.
Emergencies, like natural disasters.
Exactly. Think about it. When the power's out, cell towers are down, internet's gone. Radio broadcasts, particularly AM, can often still get through. It becomes this vital lifeline for public safety information, for updates, for instructions, when literally nothing else works. It's incredibly resilient.
That's a powerful point. And the sources also really hammered home the accessibility aspect, right?
Absolutely. Traditional radio, it's free. You just need a receiver. No subscription, no data plan, no internet required. That makes it incredibly accessible to basically everyone, everywhere.
Huge reach then.
Massive reach. And don't forget the local angle your sources mention. Radio connects communities. Local news, traffic, weather, school closures, community events, local personalities. It fosters that sense of local identity. So you've got this combination: reliability in a crisis, totally free access, and deep local connection. That's a unique mix that digital stuff doesn't quite replicate. And it makes you think, right, why is that kind of dependable, free, local info important in situations you might actually face?
Okay, so it's crucial locally, vital in emergencies. But what about the global picture? Your sources touched on that too. How does radio fit in worldwide? And maybe where's it heading?
Well, the global stats are pretty stark. One figure that really stood out from the material: over 75% of households in developing countries have access to a radio.
75%.
Yeah. And for many, it's their primary source of information. So globally, it's still absolutely fundamental, way beyond just background music or talk shows like we might think of it sometimes. And the sources also talk about diverse uses even in developed countries: Japan, the UK, the US. It's used for language learning, educational programs, public safety alerts. It's noted specifically for helping spread English language skills globally.
So it sounds like it's not just fading away. The sources suggest it's evolving.
Definitely evolving. Internet radio, satellite radio, podcasts like this, they're all part of radio's broader family now, extending that core idea of broadcasting audio.
Right, using new delivery methods.
Exactly. And here's a really interesting tidbit from the future-facing parts of the material. There are already tests underway with AI-powered radio stations.
An AI radio. Seriously.
Yep. AI choosing the music, reading news headlines, maybe even trying to interact with listeners in basic ways. It shows the underlying tech is still finding new forms, still adapting. It's definitely not dead tech.
All right, let's try and wrap our heads around all this. We've taken this deep dive into the material you provided on radio. We've gone from, the basic science and visible waves, modulation through its history, Marconi's dots and dashes, the 1920s golden age.
The living room centerpiece.
Exactly. Then understanding the difference between AM's reach and FM's clarity. And finally, exploring why it's still so incredibly vital today: emergencies, access, local connection, and even how it's evolving globally and with new tech like AI. It certainly gives you, the listener, a lot to consider about your own connection to radio. Do you still use it? When? Why? Maybe you'll hear it a bit differently after this.
And maybe here's a final thought to chew on, pulling all this together from the sources. How does this technology, built on invisible waves discovered over a century ago, just keep finding new ways to connect us? From Morse code to fireside chats to emergency alerts, now potentially AI voices. Does that constant change, that evolution, alter how we should even define radio today? What does radio really mean now? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
And thank you again for providing the sources that let us explore all this. It was fascinating.